Excellent. Another chance for me to educate and enlighten the youth of today with the ultimatum of history at CGS. By the end of this lesson, I will have eradicated the traces of nationalism and the wishes to become heroes of our nation in our youngsters. I will have got rid of their thirst for wealth and fame, and I will have taught them that the true heroes in today's world are the poor, peaceful civilizations who have been trampled on again and again by the imperialistic nations of the West. Good morning, class. Please sit down. Do your tie-ups, Michael.
Class work, sir.
Sure it did. In your exercise book, I would like you to write everything I've told you about 3 truths of capitalism, which of course I've been lecturing you about pretty much every lesson for the past 5 years. Alright, time's up. Elliot, would you please recite the 3 truths of capitalism?
Right. 3 truths of capitalism. All capitalists are more profiteers.
Number 2.
All capitalists favour economy over equality.
And number 3.
All capitalists are selfish.
Very good, Elliot. You've obviously been listening. Mike, perhaps you could recite the truths of capitalism for us.
Alright, sir. I'll recite the 3 truths. Number 1. Capitalism works. Number 2. Capitalism is democracy. And number 3. Capitalist economies are the best in the world.
Michael, your attitude is appalling. You obviously haven't been listening to a thing I've been saying. You've got to stop listening to your parents and start listening to me. You've let the lies of the Murdoch press guide you, fool. But do not fear, young Padawan, I will steer you right.
But, well, it's not worth it.
Now, I thought for an interesting lesson today, we would study the textbooks used around the country. This particular textbook is used in many institutions across the country. It's written by Percy A. Scholars, PhD from Oxford, and it is very reputable. Now, when we look at the cover, you see we have a great scientist, a great sportsman, Sir Donald Bradley, a great politician, Scott Whitlam, and great war heroes, Simpson and Gordon Donkey. It's rubbish! Where is the suffering Aboriginal? Where are the dying blacks? Where are they? This portrays an obviously biased, glossy version of our past, which is not acceptable today. It is my duty not to inform you of the glorious deeds of our past empires, but to show you the true, devious nature of all of your ancestors, and so you can feel the guilt. Yes, Mike?
So we want to learn about the glorious nature. We don't want to know about this side of presenting us. We want to know what makes us Australians, and our Australian past is from our heritage of British ancestry, and we need to learn about that. And you say this textbook is biased. The other textbooks you presented us this year all had dead natives on the cover. They've had from Australia, from North Africa, from North America, from the Caribbean, from the Pacific Islands, everywhere there's dead natives.
So I think what Michael is trying to say is that it is folly for us to gloss over the sad history of our nation. It's good, but we both agree it's good to have textbooks which portray the atrocities that we've inflicted upon the Aborigines. However, we think we should not do this alone. Perhaps we should have some textbooks of one nature and some of another. This way we will receive a broad perspective in our education. We've been learning about Aboriginals every year since year 4. Perhaps it is time for a change. We're not saying it was silly to have learned about them in the first place. It was a necessary part of our education. But
Nonsense! What of the great Eddie Marbo? I'll read it to you. Eddie Marbo, born Eddie Kofi Marbo, was born 1936 and died in 1992, a Torres Strait Islander originally. Eddie Marbo became famous in Australian history for his role in campaigning for Indigenous land rights and for his role in a landslide decision of the High Court of Australia, which overturned the legal fiction of terra nullius, which had, up until that point, characterised Australian law with regard to land and title. He was born Eddie Sambo, but mysteriously later in life changed the S to an M.
Sir, that's completely irrelevant.
He has a good point, sir. Even after 5 years of teaching us Aboriginal history, you've still got it wrong. That lesson on terra nullius was completely wrong. You told us that Captain Cook, when he saw the Aborigines near the coast, that the rest of Australia was not owned by anyone, that it was terra nullius. However, the term terra nullius was never introduced until 100 years later. Also, you portrayed the Aboriginals as a perfect harmonised race. Yes, they got on better with the environment, and they were well connected with spirit and family, but you cannot deny that the British were superior technologically. As we have to accept that the Aborigines may have had good points in their culture that the British didn't, you have to accept that the British had good points in their culture that the Aboriginals didn't have. You also must accept that to understand history, you cannot just portray one civilization as purely good and one as purely evil, as both have their pros and cons. There is value in both of what you are saying. If only you could understand each other, our lessons would be more productive, instead of blabbering on about your different egos.
Exactly. He is saying Britain brought civilised society into this country. We vote now. Now, look at places like Africa, where tribal society wasn't abolished, and look at the problems they have there. Enough tribal history. We've had 5 years of it. What about Britain?
It's a good point. Now that we've learned about Aboriginal history, cannot we learn about our own? What of the culture where we came from, Britain?
You both disgust me. Typical spoiled middle-class brat. Reciting whatever folly your parents have taught you, not listening to the truth which I am trying to tell you, in order that you may understand your fellow human beings better. If only you had been around in the 60s, you would understand this. Now, the Board of New South Wales, the Educational Board of New South Wales, has told me that I'm not allowed to just teach you the same old British history. Not that I would, even if I could, but I can't. It says that I have to teach you other things, so that it can, broaden your horizons and teach you that the British way of life is not the only way of life.
We haven't even learned our own way of life.
In that case, cannot we learn about the splendid Shogunite sword fights, or the pleasant Peruvian tribes, or perhaps the great expansive empires of China, or the marauding Mongol hordes of northern Asia?
Yes, but none of them have been crapped upon by the Brits, have they? So why bother learning about them?
Okay. Here is our education. You have Britain. Now, we're not allowed to learn about this. Now, here are some other cultures that Elliot has suggested that might be interesting to learn about. But we're not learning about them, are we? And we're not allowed to learn about Britain. Instead, we're learning about these. Now, that's all well and good, but there's not much there, is there? But the thing is, these might be fine to learn about for a while, but we are learning Britain's influence on them in a negative way. We are just learning derogatory views of ourselves instead of learning about these other cultures. What about the Russian Revolution? If you're going to teach these communist methods, you may as well teach us a bit of history behind them. And what about the Allied tactics in World War II? We've never heard a bit of that. And what about the intricate triangle between Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill? And why not learn of the huge empires battling in the Napoleonic Wars that shaped the modern Europe that we know today?
Well, look, I have a perfectly reasonable explanation for this. How about you have a 10-minute early mark? Off you go. Oh, no,